All right. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Welcome to the J podcast. I am your host, Jahans Lee Maniga, aka 12. I have with me a very, very special guest, one of my homeboys for a real long time. But before we get into that, make sure you like and follow the Fila 68 Media Network for content such as this, different representative representing their different alma maters, such as I'm doing tonight. With me, I have a man who was named honorable mention all area and honorable mention all state in both junior and senior years of high school. He averaged 16 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists a game as a senior at West Side. He attended Nebraska for a year before coming to his senses and joining the good guys. He's been a sideline commentator for the Jays. He's the innovator and the inventor of the Ross two-step. He is the godfather himself and the pride of West Side. Omaha's very own Ross Ferrarini is in the building. Let's go.
You got my high school stats, man.
Oh, I had to dig way back and find your high school stats. But also Rob Anderson makes it pretty easy for that kind of information to be out there, not gonna
lie. Yeah. High school, unfortunately, was a long time ago anymore, man. I don't know if I would have put up those numbers anymore. We got some decent talent in Omaha these days, man.
How's West Side looking? Have you been able to get back there and stay in touch?
Good. Yeah, that's actually funny that you say that. I just I played open gym with them like 2 weeks ago. They got some talented kids. They got Sharif Mitchell, who obviously is Creighton's point guard, who's hurt right now. But Sharif went to Burke, but his younger brother is I think he's a sophomore at Westside, and he's a nice little player himself too. So they got some guys. They should be definitely one of the state title contenders this year. But man, it's just crazy. Like the talent in the city anymore is nuts. Obviously, Hunter Salas was a top 10 recruit. He's a freshman at Gonzaga now, played at Millard North. There's kids all over the country from the city playing all over. It's nice.
Just saw Jason Green committed to be a Blue Jay today. Welcome to the family. We're sure we'll all get to meet him very soon. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
The talent in Omaha is for sure exponentially growing year by year. I remember when I first came as a freshman, some of the talk was that we're not getting enough Nebraska products at Creighton, at Nebraska, even for Nebraska basketball. And now you see we're trying to recruit those kids pretty hard. So being from Omaha and obviously having been in that situation, how crazy is it to see like the development of how much these Omaha kids, these Nebraska kids getting recruited nationwide now?
Dude, yeah, it's nuts. Just in general. So my younger brother, Nick, who, obviously he's I guess he's technically a junior at plays at UNO. And he, so he went to Millard North. He had a great career at Millard North. So when he was a senior at Millard North, Hunter Salas was a freshman. Max Morrell was a sophomore. And so Max is currently a sophomore at Stanford, plays at Stanford. Hunter Salas was obviously a top 10 recruit, plays at Gonzaga. And then right behind them, so he would have been an eighth grader at the time, and he's a senior now, is Jason Green, who's a senior at Millard North and is committed to Creighton. So they've just that's just one school in general that's had kids, coming out of there like crazy. And then I'm not even mentioning St. Thomas, who's a freshman at Loyola Chicago. It was also at Millard North last year. So they've had D1 kids like crazy over the past few years. And it's just, it's been like that. It's been kind of a steady climb. I don't really, I think the city's just grown so much over the past decade plus that there's just a lot more kids now. And there's just a lot of kids in that demographic. And it's, the Omaha Sports Academy Crusaders AAU program has really, really helped. They're on the Adidas Gauntlet. There's a couple other AAU programs that are on the shoe circuits now. So it's just, there's a lot of kids, a lot of resources. It's awesome to see. Like I said, I would have been an average high school player, man. Like if I played today, I'll tell you that much.
I'm glad that you mentioned the resources too, because I think about this often, and I think about it from the lens of just being a player from Canada, growing up in Canada. These kids are getting like hoop mixtapes out of nowhere that never existed when I grew up. Only like a handful of guys like the John Walls of the world, the Brendan Jennings of the world got these hoop mixtapes.
Right.
Oh, I'm Canadian. And everyone know that kid. I'm like, no, I don't know that kid.
No, I don't know that kid.
But he's a hooper though.
Yeah.
He's a hooper though, and who has access to be filmed and to show his film to everyone in the nation.
I know, man. It's a different day and age. Like you're 100% correct. I mean, when we were coming up, I mean, Twitter existed, but it was not, it was just kind of this small thing that like people just kind of like played around on. It wasn't like it is now. And so
Yeah.
you just got so many kids and different like entities, different like independent journalists that are following all these kids and following the AAU scene and documenting everything that they do. And like you said, coming out with all these different mixtapes and whatnot. It's just so many more eyeballs on these kids now that like a lot of high level kids aren't really falling through the cracks. Like maybe that they used to back in the day when there wasn't all this hype on social media. So it's crazy, but yeah, I mean, Canada's got a few ballers these days, man. It's impressive.
Yeah, we got one in particular that we're definitely going to talk about. We got to talk about the game from last night. A little bit of a shaky start for the Jays, but they end up winning 90-77. So they got all the fans of Godfather pieces that they wanted, something that for whatever reason was attached to your personality.
Yeah.
But a shaky start for the Jays. Halfway through the first half, what were kind of your thoughts and your impressions? Like, I can certainly tell you what mine were, but I definitely want to hear what your opinion was.
Yeah, well, honestly, my overarching opinion right off the bat was like, this is not the same Pine Bluff team that we used to play back in the day. I mean, those teams were bad. Like, we're talking seriously bad. I mean, this team actually had a couple of guys that could do some things that could break you down. Obviously, they were making shots. So it was like, whoa, this isn't some just, lay down Pine Bluff team from 2012 that we used to play. Like, these guys. And that's what's so interesting anymore about the game is, because of the transfer market and because it's almost like free agency anymore, is so many programs have all these kids that are transfers and that have played at higher levels elsewhere. So it's sort of interesting. That was my first impression, is that they've got way more talent, I guess, than I expected. Certainly not that they're, going to win 20 games this year or anything like that. I'm not saying that, but they definitely have more talent than I expected. And then the turnovers, I mean, that was a thing that stood out right off the bat is this team's turning the ball over a lot, and they're just kind of trying to find themselves offensively. And especially when you play for somebody like Mac, who allows you to play some free flowing offense and let you make mistakes, and he wants to get up and down the floor. So when you have a lot of young kids and new faces, you're gonna make some mistakes and turn the ball over playing that type of style. That's just the way it is. So those are my first impressions. I said this last night on the postgame show. I didn't have down 9 to Pine Bluff at halftime on my season bingo board, but I'm glad that they kind of turned it around in the second half for sure.
Well, it's great that you mentioned, one, the continuity isn't necessarily there for the Jays yet, which is what leads to some of those turnovers. These guys, in my opinion, are still not only young as a team, but they're young with that camaraderie, with that getting to know each other on the floor, which is something that, the teams that you and I were on, we had great camaraderie, but it took time to get there, right? Like my freshman year, it didn't look so hot. Right. But I'm just so happy that they were able to turn it around, because at one point I was like, yikes, like this is not looking so hot. But I certainly understand that it takes a little time to get, a groove growing, especially for those guys who are playing their first games, who also, when you look at the stats at the end of the game, they look very impressive. But it's just that first 8 to 12 minutes look very, very shaky for the boys.
Yeah, they were trying to get their feet under them, and it's hard, man. Like you're playing in your first. It doesn't matter who you're playing. You're playing in your first Division I college basketball game. There's fans back in the arena now. It's a different deal. It doesn't matter who you're playing. I mean, and this is where kind of what I touched on earlier with the transfer market, the way it is now, and the parity in college basketball is unbelievable now compared to what it used to be. I mean, you see low majors beating high majors all the time. There was a few of them last night. The Citadel went into Pitt and won by 15 yesterday. I mean, there's just way more of that anymore. And so these other teams have got players. And so you can't just, walk into a game and say, oh, we're playing Pine Bluff. Like, I'll just kind of go through the motions and we're going to win by 50. Gonzaga and Texas can do that, but not everybody else can do that, So it was nice to see them bounce back though.
Before we move on to the next topic, let me tell you guys a little bit about our partners over at BetRivers Sportsbook. If you haven't signed up with BetRivers yet, now's the time, because they're offering a $250 match bonus for your first deposit. But what sets them apart is that they require just one playthrough to turn your bonus into cash money. With their new Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawing your winnings is safer, more secure, and more reliable. With basketball season tipping off, get in on the action by going to betrivers.com today or by downloading the BetRivers iOS app. You must be 21 years or older. Gambling problem? Call telephone number 1-800-GAMBLER. Another thing I have to mention, the Jays can fly, and I'm not talking about threes anymore. Them dudes are attacking the rim like no other.
Yes,
and
we
I
haven't had
remember
moves like that.
exactly. I remember the one team that kind of this team reminds me of as far as first impressions concerned is that Justin Patton, Maurice Watson, Marcus Foster, Kyrie Thomas. I think Cole Huff was starting at the 4 at the time, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
But that team got up on the rim too. But
that team
the Jays are very athletic.
Yeah, Kaluma's a guy that's he's a player, man. I mean, he had a crazy dunk, and then obviously Alex O'Connell, the coaching staff has been telling us for a couple of years now, or I guess a year and a half or whenever since Alex has been there, that he's the most athletic guy on the team, and you certainly saw that last night. So. Between Kaluma and Alex and I think Trey Alexander and Ryan Nemhard's an athletic kid too. I mean, they've certainly got some of those type of guys that we've obviously had. Creighton, I think, and especially like nationally, the perspective on Creighton is these are a bunch of skilled players. They always have shooters. They move the ball. They run this fun type of offense. But it's not like we've got, a bunch of dunk contest guys, coming out of the locker room year after year. We've had some athletic guys, don't get me wrong, but this team kind of looks different in that respect.
Yeah, for sure. I can't wait for them to get more deflections. Once they transfer that athleticism to the defensive end, get some more steals, get up on the break, we're going to be seeing a lot more high flying dunks. But it was very impressive to see some of the stuff that those guys were doing last night. I have to mention this. This is not something that I like to do, but Kalkbrenner didn't look quite like the Kalkbrenner we expected to see, especially playing with Team USA, having a pretty good freshman year, going into his sophomore year. I think a lot of us expected a lot of big things out of them. Kind of tough matchup for him last time with those guys spreading it out as much as they did and him really not finding a spot on the floor to be really effective. But a slow start to this season. What do you think our expectations should be for Kalkbrenner this year? Yeah, no, it's a really good question because we talked about it last night on postgame a little bit, and I was chatting with some people this morning in the office about him. I mean, Ryan he's an interesting case study because he's so one, he's obviously so big and long, but he's so skilled too, especially around the rim, right? Like he's a guy that if he's in the right matchup and in the right spots, I mean, he'll go 7 or 8 from the field like it's nothing. I mean, he's just got that touch around the rim. But for some reason with Ryan, there's always seems to be, I don't know what the right word is. Maybe like sometimes a lack of fire a little bit. Maybe that's, and I'm not this a little timid, maybe that. Yeah, and I'm not saying that that's what he actually is. That's maybe just how it comes off sometimes when you're just watching him on the floor. I think he's just, he's a guy that he's not going to get near as fired up as some other people, might get fired up. So it's sometimes you feel like it's like, all right, Ryan, like let's turn up the intensity a couple of notches here and go from there. But yeah, so I don't know. I think he only played 14 minutes or something, and Keyshawn came off the bench and played 23. I'm not sure if there's some underlying, maybe Ryan like didn't feel well or something. Even if he wasn't, playing to his best capabilities, 14 minutes does seem a little light. So I'm not sure if there's more there than it, but yeah, it's the first game. Ryan's going to have some moments this year that are going to remind us all that he was, on Team USA, U19 team for a reason. And I'm expecting him to get back to that type of level at some point. He was the only starter to not be in double figures last night, which, sometimes that can happen. But like I said, I just felt like he would be one of those mainstays, which we would really, really rely on. I still think he will be, but I also think the matchup last night just didn't necessarily favor a guy of his size and his skill. And Coach Mack made the decision kind of pretty early on to go with guys who are going to be able to play at the pace that Pine Bluff was playing at, because those guys were also pushing the ball back against the Jays.
Right. They were, and the other, I think the other weakness of Ryan's is foot speed. And when you're playing a team like that, that's really playing basically all guards. I mean, they don't really have any bigs, and they're trying to get out in passing lanes and create steals and get up and down the floor. And they wanted a high paced game too. So I think that just sometimes that doesn't fit Ryan as well. That type of game, right? Some Keyshawn Fizel, who's just a little bit more athletic, a little bit faster. And so you saw Keyshawn get some decent minutes last night, which he's a guy I'm excited about. I think he provides a pretty nice spark off the bench as a big who can do some things, a little bit more versatile. Obviously, he's a pretty strong kid. He's kind of been through some wars in college basketball. He kind of gets how it works. So I think he's going to be a guy that could really, really help them this year.
We got to talk about the freshman first, Ryan Nemhard, the Canadian kid, the second ever Blue Jay Canadian. I was the first one. I'm very proud to say. 15 and 11 in his. I was the first and the one and only. I've been begging Coach Mack to keep recruiting up there. He doesn't want to go up there,
wow.
I guess.
Wow. We got the. Hold on. We got the lights. There we go. Sorry.
There we go. No, you're good.
Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't realize you were the one and only. That seems crazy to me.
When I first got there, I asked Rob Anderson to look into it, and he confirmed after going through years and years of rosters that I was the first Canadian to ever play. And so now we have our second one in Ryan Nemhard, 15 points, 10 assists. I love his pace. I love the way that he plays. His head is always up, and he just seems so wise beyond his years. First impressions of Ryan Nemhard.
Well, I'll tell you my uncle's first impression. I talked to my uncle in the office this morning, and he came in and he proclaimed that after one game, he thinks Ryan Nemhard will be the best point guard to ever play at Creighton. I go, man, listen, I'm high on him too, but like you're saying that after one game against Arkansas Pine Bluff, like you sure you want to give it a little bit of time?
Ryan Sears out the window.
Yeah. I'm like, all right, man, like sure. No, I love obviously most people that are hoops junkies that understand the game well. You watch him for 10 minutes and you just fall in love with him, right? Like he's just a guy who is so smooth, so fluid with the ball, pushes the ball in transition, gets the spots, knows where everybody is on the floor. He's just a player, man. Like that's at the end of the day, sometimes we tend to overcomplicate things in our game, and he's just one of those guys that's just like he's just a player. He just knows what he's doing. He's a guy that gets it. I'm extremely impressed. He obviously turned the ball over a little bit, but one, that's going to happen in our system with some young guys. Two, he's got the ball in his hands constantly, and they're giving him the freedom to go out and make plays. So I wouldn't look too far. I would caution people not to look too far into the turnover thing. Now, if he's starting to really, really turn the ball over at a high clip and at inopportune times consistently throughout the year, then maybe we can say that. But I think he'll find his footing there for sure.
Arthur Kaluma, 15 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, a couple of blocks in there too, if I'm not mistaken. He just looks like a different type of freshman, in my opinion. Not one that we've had our eyes on in a Blue Jay uniform in a really, really long time. Okay, you're already speaking on it. Tell me how you feel.
I love him. I love him. I mean, so another piece of interesting info was, so he played for the Uganda national team this summer, right? And that was that the African countries qualifier?
So he played for the U19 team as well as the men's national team for the Afro Basket qualifiers.
Afro Basket, that's right. Mm-hmm. And Mike Brown, who has been a longtime NBA head coach, is currently Steve Kerr's assistant with the Golden State Warriors. Was the head coach of the Nigerian team and was really high on him after they played Uganda. And so I think that speaks volumes. A guy that's been, a staple in the NBA as a coach for as long as Mike Brown has, speaking that highly of Arthur. And so I think Jays fans have had high expectations for him and been excited to watch him play just because of what we hear about him. And he's a guy that's going to be really, really, really good. I mean, he's an athletic kid, strong, tenacious. goes after offensive rebounds. He's just, I think once he starts to find a rhythm with his jump shot as well, he's going to be a guy that can score kind of from anywhere on the floor, and he's going to be really, really hard to guard. So I'm pumped to see Arthur, man. I'm pumped to see his development, no doubt.
Jays fans are going to be really happy that he's wearing our jersey instead of another jersey of any other of these college teams around the nation.
100%.
Ryan Hawkins, a Division II transfer who came in. I love his grit. I love his toughness. 16 points, 11 rebounds. He's going to have like that role of like the guy who does all the dirty work, who brings his hard hat on to every game. What were your impressions of him in his first time in a Blue Jay uniform?
Yeah, no, you're kind of spot on with that description. I mean, he's one of those dudes who just knows how to play the game, kind of like Ryan Nembhard a little bit, obviously a different position, but he always kind of seemed to be in the right spot at the right time. You know, he's not a guy, at least on TV. I didn't go to the game last night. I just watched on Fox Sports 1, but I mean, he doesn't seem terribly physically intimidating, like, or imposing, but he just knows how to play. Like he's always in the right spot at the right time. Obviously can knock down open jumpers, great pick and pop guy, but I think he can do a little bit more than, you know, because I think body size, he's really similar to like Raggi, but he can do more than just pick and pop. I mean, he can probably put the ball on the floor a little bit too and get to the rim, and he'll grab some offensive rebounds and putbacks. So yeah, it's a crazy jump for him. I mean, he's going from Division II to the high major level, and he's playing the Big East from Division II just a year ago. So obviously he's good enough to play at this level, but it's going to be a little bit of an adjustment. But I expect him, of all people, he's been around the game, he's older, he knows what he's doing. I expect him to have a pretty solid year, no doubt.
So you say you watched a game on Fox Sports last night as well, right?
Yeah.
So did you have the frustrations of jumping around from game to game?
Well, no, bro. So if you watch on the app, so like I have Apple TV, so I just have the Fox Sports app. You could watch the full game on the app instead of like if I just had cable. If I was just in my office or something and had it on cable, they would do the jump around thing. So I actually, since I live, you've been to my place in Omaha. I live right by CHI, so I tried to walk over there at halftime. And they're doing this deal this year where they have all like digital tickets. Like, I don't think they printed tickets this year. And I pulled up the tickets. I'm walking over there at half, and I pull up the tickets, and it said they expired. And at halftime, I'm like, what?
Damn.
So I just walked back to my place. And watched TV, I'm like, all right, that's that, I guess.
I had to jump around going from game to game for a little bit. I actually had to come back and watch the game on Synergy earlier today. Obviously, I have a 7-hour time difference. So that's how I was able to like actually see the flow of the game.
See what's going on.
Yeah, because I caught some glimpses of it live, and I kept being like, dude, come on, man, go back to the Creighton game. Like, stop talking. Like, Jackson, get off the screen, man. And you know, I'm a big Bill Raftery guy, but I was like, come on, guys.
Yeah,
like,
they're talking, man. Yeah, that's the one thing. It's like, all right, if you want to jump to another game with some action, that's one thing. It's still a tad annoying, but like, all right. But I don't need. Yeah, we don't need those guys.
Oh, you muted yourself still, I think.
I'm muted.
There. No, you're good. We got you back.
Man, I feel like I'm like a boomer right now with this. What is going on here?
No, you're good. You got. Oh, well, now I got your video and no audio. There it is. You're perfect now. You're good.
I can't see you though, man. It's got me in safe driving mode.
Oh, well, as long as I can see you, I think we're.
You can see me fine now?
Yeah, we're good. We're perfect.
This is crazy, bro. All right, continue.
No, I was saying that like all the commentating that was happening as they were jumping around from game to game, like just jump from one game to the other, show the action instead of just being in the studio talking about all these Big East teams.
It's and then you got So I saw, but you probably saw a little bit of some other Big East teams. I mean, I saw Xavier struggle with Niagara. St. John's waxed Mississippi Valley.
A little bit of a cakewalk there.
Yeah. What were your like brief impressions on some of those other teams that you saw, if anything?
Well, to be honest, to see Shaka Smart's system in a Marquette jersey was a little weird. I'm not gonna lie to you, like that was weird to see those guys kind of fly around and compete so hard defensively, because I haven't seen a Marquette team really be that committed to the defensive end since I'm blanking on the coach's name who is at Virginia Tech now.
Buzz Williams.
Buzz, yeah, since Buzz was
Well, he's
over
at
there.
Texas A&M now, but he did go to Virginia Tech.
Oh,
yes.
actually,
Yeah.
see, people are just
Yeah.
flying around all over the nation. I didn't even know that.
People, job to job, man.
It's hard to keep track of where everybody
It's
is.
crazy.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy. But Shaka and Marquette's going to take some getting used to. That's a different one, no doubt. They struggled a little bit. I saw with SIU Edwardsville. They don't have a lot of guys back. They had some transfers. You look for the rec games. It's a different deal. So, but he's got to build it back up.
Before we get away from the GA's game last time, we got to talk about Alex O'Connell. Finally, started to fall. He really brought some energy with obviously his dunks and him flying high towards the rim. But I think he's going to have a very specific role this year, which is, maybe his point production might not be as high as always, but I think in key moments when Jays need a basket, he's certainly going to be one of the guys that they're going to look forward to. What is do you think I have the right take on that? Or do you think that would be maybe somebody else in the lineup?
No, I think maybe by the end of the year, that guy where they might need a bucket in a close game, that guy could develop into being Kaluma. I think right now you're probably right that it's Alex, and Alex didn't play great in the first half. I was a little bit concerned at the first half. I'm like, man, Alex is kind of supposed to be our guy, our steady guy, and he kind of struggled in the first half, but man, he found his footing in the second half. I mean, he's a guy that obviously has a pretty elite level of athleticism. He got in some passing lanes and got some dunks that got him fired up, and that gave him some confidence, started knocking down some shots too. So he's I think this is going to be a very, very inconsistent 3-point shooting team compared to what we're used to at Creighton.
Right.
I mean, we've only had maybe one or two teams that couldn't shoot it all that well. And even those teams still shot it relatively well compared to the rest of the country. So it's just kind of a different makeup than what we're used to. But he's one guy that I think is going to have to shoot the ball consistently pretty well this year. And I think we might be in decent shape if he can do that. So I'm high on Alex. I think he does some really nice things. It's a different deal for him. He's a bench guy at Duke, has a little bit of success there. Then he comes here, gets eligible after a few games. It's the COVID year. He comes off the bench for a team that's got all these guys that had just won the Big East a year prior. So he's kind of getting his feet wet with them. So now he's kind of like the guy. It's a different position for him. So I think he'll definitely settle in, and I'm excited about Alex. I think he's going to be a really key cog this year.
I had a few people text me during the game last night, like, man, I've never seen the Jays miss this many threes. It's like, guys, it's game one. It's game one. This is I know we're jumping the gun a ton and we're trying to give our first impressions of the team, but we also have to realize patience is going to be what is needed to be exercised this year. This is a young team
100%.
who hasn't played a lot of basketball together. We still need to give them a little bit of leeway to learn and to maybe, shoot themselves in the foot every once in a while, but learn from that process, keep getting better game by game.
Couldn't agree more. There's going to be some learning pains with this team, no doubt about it. I mean, I said this before the season started. They're going to lose a couple games or probably be in some close, tight games that they shouldn't be. Okay. Case in point last night, but they're probably at some point this year, they're going to beat somebody or be in the game with somebody they shouldn't be. And that remains to be seen, obviously. But that's just something we're going to have to deal with this year. It's a different team.
Right. Coach Mack has this saying where he says it's never as good as it seems and it's never as bad as it seems. It's usually somewhere in the middle. I think that's really going to apply with this year's team for sure.
100%.
I mentioned your high school stats in the open. You come from a basketball playing family. Your brothers play basketball. You play basketball. When did you guys realize this is what it is? We love basketball. We want to be hoopers. This is what we're gearing towards in our lives.
Man, I don't know. It's interesting when you're a kid. I mean, you kind of you almost get adopted into it, just based on kind of what your family, does. I mean, my whole family played hoops. My dad played in high school. My uncles played in high school. And so they just love hoops, and we just love sports in general. I mean, we've just every single sport we played. My brother Steven, who you obviously know, I mean, he played high school football, is a good high school football player. Nick, the youngest one, was a good athlete too. But for whatever reason, basketball was just kind of our thing. It was just the one of all the main sports that we all played that we all just gravitated to. So yeah, I don't know. And then so when I was growing up too, my dad helped out. I think I was in elementary school, maybe like second or third grade or something. And he started helping out at Scott Catholic High School, just kind of on the side as a volunteer. He knew the head coach, and then he moved on to helping that same head coach at Westside for about a decade. And so we just, every winter, that was just our deal. Like we're in the gym, and even in the summer, as you know, like even in the summers, you're in the gym because AAU. So we're just constantly spent time in the gym. I mean, that's just, especially the winter months, it's just like basketball. I mean, I've told people before, I've never been skiing once in my life. And I get this like incredulous look, like, how come you have not skied before? Like, how's that possible?
Right.
I'm like, dude, you gotta understand, once the winter comes, that's all we do is we're in the gym.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know, man. It's just, I'm sure it's like you, it's the same thing. Like as a kid, like basketball just becomes your thing, right? And then that's
right.
that.
Bro, it's so funny that you mentioned that, because I'm Canadian, and when I talk to people I've never been skiing or snowboarding, like they look at me like I'm insane.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, you're absolutely right at the fact that, like, okay, it's like AU season all summer long, and then before you know it, it's fall. So you're training for basketball, then it's basketball season over the winter time.
Yeah.
Before you know it, the like cycle continues, and you just don't do any of these outdoor activities that most kids get into because you're just constantly in the gym.
Yeah, man, it's an all year deal anymore. I mean, I remember getting done with the high school season back in the day, and literally the weekend after, or like 2 or 3 days after the high school season, the state tournament ends, you get right into AAU practice, like for the spring and the summer. So it just, and hoops, really the only month that people is more of kind of a down month where people don't really do anything is August. That kind of across the board. August is more of a chill month for about every level, but other than that, it's pretty much full go at like every single month of the year.
Bro, you know what, I can't, like, when I think back on it, every time I think back on it, I think it's so absurd. Maybe it's because we're in our 30s now, but I think back to like those weekends where you have to play like 6, 7, 8 games to win a championship.
Insane.
Could you imagine putting your body through that?
No, man. No. Bro, I play in a Wednesday night league now, and so it's just one game on Wednesday nights, and I mean, like I can barely walk to the bathroom in the morning on Thursdays. Like it's like that, it's that painful. So it's just it's different when you're that age. I don't know what it is. You can just go.
Right. I'm so happy you're on the podcast. You're actually the first walk on that I've had on the podcast, and I think you guys don't get nearly enough credit for, what it takes to be a walk-on, to get on a team. You never know when your number is going to be called, but you know that the main job is for you to prepare like the team to play against. You play a lot of scout team, so you have to know the opponent's team sets, and you have to know your own sets, and it's just a whole ordeal.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Talk to me about like some of the things that like the average fan wouldn't necessarily know about walk-ons, and what it takes to be a walk-on, and to go through that grind every single day as a collegiate student.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with like the plays and the scout team, because in the middle of the year when you're kind of immersed in scout team, and some programs get way more into scout team than others. Coach Mack is a guy that gets pretty detailed with his scout teams. So yeah, you just have to remember everything. I mean, but the good thing is it helps you really like learn the game. Obviously when you're coming from high school and you know how to play and stuff, but you're not, the intricacy of plays and stuff is not what it is at the college and at the pro level and everything. So you learn the game from a deeper level, and like what all 5 guys are supposed to be doing on the floor. So that's something I think that really helped me, and kind of conceptualize everything that's going on the floor is, okay, we have our own stuff that we run at Creighton, right? Like I know all of those things, that I know how we're supposed to play, but every single program does things differently. Okay. At the end of the day, yes, basketball is basketball, but there's a million different ways you can play it. And so that was kind of an interesting education. I got from being on scout team all those years was all these programs do things so much more differently from either an offensive standpoint or a defensive standpoint. And so you just learn to play all these different styles. That was really interesting to me. Obviously it's time consuming, man. Like you can get down. I mean, I'm trying to think back, like you can get down on yourself sometimes because you're, there's not enough hours in the day. Like you're going to class, then you're going to hoops and it's like, obviously, that you're not going to play a whole lot. And it's just, and it's different everywhere. It depends what type of team you're on. Like I was on good teams. Like I thought I was a decent player, but I wasn't going to play on our teams because I had guys in front of me that were better than me. It's just how it is. And some on and all of a sudden, there's tons of injuries, guys don't pan out, and then you get a whole bunch of minutes. It's different everywhere. And so you gotta, I guess, have a strong enough mindset to be like, this is what I gotta do. I don't have the luxury of kind of just going through the motions sometimes, like maybe some of the scholarship guys might do just because they're bigger and more athletic and more talented. So it kind of gives you that internal work ethic of what do I need to do to try and be successful. And then the other thing I would say is it would be really, really hard. I will say this, it would be really, really hard to be a walk-on if you weren't on a team full of guys that you enjoyed being around. Like if you look back at our teams, some of my best friends in the world who I played college hoops with, and we all got along and it was fun and it was always, we were laughing constantly. It was awesome, but it's not like that everywhere. I mean, there's teams where there's a lot of bad dudes on the team and it's just a much different vibe. And I think that would be a way, 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 way harder place to be a walk-on.
What you just said right there, like it rings so true to me because like when I talk about my college experience with some of the teammates, like the import teammates, the American teammates that I have overseas, they look at me like I'm an alien. Like that is not at all their, that is not at all their experience. Like I don't want to call out any school in particular, but like I always tell somebody like, oh, like we used to hang out all the time. Like when I go back in the summer times, I still hang out with those guys. We still kind of, even though our lives kind of bring us in these different paths, we still find times to, hang out with each other, get to catch up and take each other out to eat and go out and have a good time. Those guys don't do that. They go back to their alma maters and they just do their own thing, or they just refuse to go back at all, which is kind of crazy in my opinion, because I could never imagine that being our situation.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, it's different everywhere. And I think at the end of the day, that's where it eventually falls on the head coach to establish an unbelievable culture. And not every program's as fortunate as us. We have a head coach who is big on that and who understands the importance of that. And so for the most part, the guys he recruits are good dudes that are going to fit in with most of the guys that they play with. And so it's all kind of just continues to feed on each other and compound. And all of a sudden you have this great culture of all good dudes that want to see each other succeed. Now, it's not to sit here and say that every single person comes in and fits in that mold perfectly. That would be impossible. But it starts with the head coach and his staff, in my personal opinion. As a guy that's been around college basketball, I've been around a lot of other staffs. I coached for a bit after college. It's it's not an easy thing to implement like that type of culture. It's really not. So it's a unique thing that Creighton has.
You and Taylor Stormberg used to give me fits. You guys were the two guys that I had to defend the most during my time. And like, it's so crazy because like, you guys would run, obviously, like you mentioned, different systems from different programs, and not all programs run the same things. So from week to week to week, you guys would show up with a totally different play style that I had to adjust before a couple of days before we had the day off, and then I had to do it all over again. I remember vividly my freshman year one time, I forgot who we were playing against, but you came off a down screen. I thought I had defended you pretty well. You put the ball on the ground, like a hard dribble, a nice little side step, pulled up, knocked it down. When I went back to the sideline, I remember Daryl Ashford said, "Dude, you're fine. Like he hit you with the two-step." And I was like, "Damn." What? So my question to you, Ross, is: do you remember like specifically maybe I don't want to say like a playbook per se, but like a style of play that that was implemented during that week of scout team, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna have myself a good week because like I know that kind of style and it really fits
Yeah.
into my game.
Typically, I'm trying to think of like scout. I'm trying to go back and think of scouts. So I usually played, if Creighton fans remember Colt Ryan for Evansville,
Oh yeah.
I usually played him, which was fun, and it wasn't fun because like everything they do went through him. So and
Mhm.
they ran kind of a more old school type of offense where they would set a million like double screens for him and screens away from the ball, and the whole
Yeah.
design was to get him the ball. So I remember I would just be exhausted after those practices because like the whole time we would be doing scout stuff and like the idea I'm running off a million screens and then the idea
Mhm.
was to like basically get me the ball and I had the green light to go score, which is fun, but at the same
Yeah.
time when like the entire defense is keying on somebody, it can be pretty exhausting. So
Axing.
that's
Yeah.
one that stands out, and that's honestly, God, that makes you appreciate like guys that can really put the ball in the hoop and that have the entire defense's attention on them constantly. It makes you appreciate those guys way more because it is not
Mhm.
easy to constantly have guys running at you, constantly have double teams, guys on your hip, fighting through screens like crazy. So that's always an interesting. That was always an interesting scout, to say the least. But usually, the most fun I had doing any sort of scout were teams that got up and down the floor and kind of fired threes. Like that was my game. Like
Yeah.
I remember when we played Alabama in the NCAA tournament in 2012, and they had like no shooters, and so
Right.
they just played a
And they were
different.
slowing it down, walking it up the
Yeah,
court. Yeah.
they played a different brand, man. And
Yeah.
I remember the coaches were like, Ross, I'll be honest, we don't really have anyone that you can play. Like you're not you're not a 6'8" long, super athletic dudes, and that's what
Yeah.
all they have. So yeah, you might have to sit out a lot of plays as scout team.
Nice. Easy week for you then, right?
Yeah, yeah. No,
I want to go back.
it was interesting though, man. It was just yeah, it was a fun education, no doubt.
Hmm. I want to go back to that Colt Ryan example. When you spend like the week, you know, exemplifying a particular individual, and then we play them, and let's just say like we're playing them, and I'm messing up on the floor, and you see Colt Ryan score. What goes through your head after like that entire week of like running those sets and knowing exactly what's gonna happen? If someone like me messes up, what goes through your head at that point in time?
Well, I think honestly, man, what's interesting about stuff like that is you can practice, like you can do all that you want on scout team. Okay, you can try and simulate what the other team's going to do 1,000 different ways and 1,000 times until it's until you're blue in the face. But at the end of the day, like obviously this doesn't come as a secret. Like I was not as good as Colt Ryan. Colt Ryan was a much better basketball player than me. So all of a sudden, yes, despite the fact that you do know what's going on, what they're going to run for him, like you spend 2 days guarding me in practice, who's far inferior as a basketball talent to somebody like a Colt Ryan. So then it's kind of brought up a notch. Not only that, but then like obviously the actual team that's running their stuff is going to do it better than any
Better.
scout
Yeah.
team. So it's always a little bit different. I think there comes a point of, in my opinion, there comes a point of no return. Sometimes like you can over prepare, I think, and like overdo things. And I'm not saying that we did or didn't do that. It sounds like most successful programs really, implement their scout team as thoroughly as possible. But it does come a point at sometimes, in my opinion, a point of no return where it's like, all right, we know that they're going to run some of these things. We don't need to beat this into submission here. Like, let's just try and get guys the right spots and go from there,
Right. You talked about, your NCAA tournament experience where we beat Alabama. We lost North Carolina in
Yeah.
Greensboro, which is a tough task. I think that was your actual last collegiate basketball game,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But you got to experience the NCAA tournament. Talk to me about like going through that journey of, I mentioned in the open that, you went to Nebraska for a year, then you came home to Omaha and you were a Blue Jay and you're a ride or die Blue Jay ever since then. Like I
Yeah.
almost didn't even, I almost forgot that you went to Nebraska when I was
A
like
lot of people
looking up
forget
some of the
that.
stuff on the yeah. So
Yeah.
talk to me about like your overall college experience and like for it to culminate to end the way that it did. Like, what were your thoughts going through your mind like during that moment, if you can remember that?
Yeah, no, I remember it fondly. Well, funny enough to go back forward too. I always like whenever anybody sometimes whenever people mention Nebraska, I played in one. I played in one game. I played against Chadron State, Division II Chadron State, and then I redshirted. And so I played a few minutes towards the end of the game, and I got called for a charge. I was like an 18-year-old kid and got called for a charge on this like 240 pounds. This like 240-pound bro. It was pretty alarming looking back. But no, that week, I mean, I remember that week pretty fondly. Obviously, the Alabama game. I remember us hanging on as we had fans at that airport hotel. We stayed at the hotel by the airport. Which,
God.
Come on, man! Like, don't stick us up there. Like,
Right.
we went out to dinner a few different times. Greensboro was actually a nice little town. And yeah, obviously we had a great game against Alabama. That was a ton of fun. Won at the end of the game. For those that watch the NBA, they had JaMychal Green on their team, who's still in the league. I think he plays for the Nuggets. Yes, I think.
Yeah, he's on the Nuggets this year. Was on the Clippers for a couple of years back.
Yeah, played for the
or a couple
Clippers,
of years
now on
ago.
the Nuggets.
Yeah.
So they had him. Anthony Grant was their head coach, who's now the head coach at Dayton. This thing keeps like it's got to do the. There we go. So yeah, great game. We're in Greensboro. I'm trying to think of other things that were fun about that trip. Obviously, I can't remember if it was the game right after us where CJ McCollum and Lehigh beat Duke.
Oh yeah, snapped, absolutely snapped and beat Duke. Yeah.
So that was a kind of a fun story from that time too. So then obviously we go and we play North Carolina. It's in Greensboro. I vividly remember it being an absolute home game for them. Like we had the place was packed. We had our tiny little section for Creighton, and then the rest of the arena was all Carolina, and it was a home game. They had if you go and look at North Carolina's roster that year, they had 8 guys that played in the NBA, which is to think about that is insane. I mean, that's the level of talent on that roster is out of control. So obviously they beat us. I thought we played them okay. Like we hung in there pretty tough. They just quite honestly, man, they had too many guys. Like at the end of the day, sometimes most of the time, that's just kind of how it goes. So I think I played at the end of the game. I played like 90 seconds or something. We played a little 2-3 zone. Yeah, no, it's a fun experience, awesome experience. Jim Nance did our game. I remember talking to Jim Nance for like 5 minutes before because the Masters was coming up in like 3 weeks and he was doing the Masters. So I chatted with him about NCAA tournament and the Masters, and yeah, very, very fond memories of that week.
I do remember a handful of Duke fans stayed back because of their hatred of North Carolina was so strong that they just started cheering for us, but it just wasn't enough to drown out the sea of UNC blue, even though we did have our little section, which obviously we appreciate, but in that Coliseum,
it was a home game for Carolina, man.
Yeah, it was a home game for Carolina for sure. And yeah, I do remember that year because my brother was low-key a huge Austin Rivers fan. He was another one of those like early hoop mixtape guys. So my brother actually drove up to North Carolina to watch us play, but he stayed back and watched that game. And then now he's a CJ McCollum fan to this day. Like he switched over from Austin Rivers to CJ that day. So I do remember that time.
It's crazy to think. It's crazy to think back on that. Like I mean, CJ McCollum. I mean, he's as good as they get in the NBA, and he was on a 15 seat out there just getting buckets on Austin Rivers and Duke. Man, it's crazy.
Bro, we talked about the camaraderie that we have on our team. I think it's been mentioned so often before, but that trip to the Bahamas is really what helped us really, 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 really connect as a team. We got to hang out so much and start to form like that lifelong brotherhood. I know you were a big fan of the Bahamas. What was your favorite moment of that trip as we wrap it up here on the Welcome to the J podcast?
Man, Bahamas. I'm trying to think, man. I mean, we just, like everything we did as a team was just hysterical. I mean, obviously we played in that kind of ratty gym. And I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but we played against one of those teams, one of those kind of semi-pro Bohemian teams or whatever. And later that, I can't remember if it was that night or if it was like the next night, we all went to the casino because you go to the casinos there at 18. And so we all went to the casino, and one of the dudes that we had played against was like one of the card dealers for one of the games. And we were going nuts. And I remember the same lines, the casino story. We're at the roulette table, and Josh Jones had won like 2 or 3 times in a row on roulette. Right. And like, you know how Jones is, he was getting so fired up, like every time his number hit or every time red or black hit. And he was just going crazy, and they had to tell him to like calm down. They're like, you gotta get away from the table.
Right. He didn't know casino etiquette. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jonesy was losing his mind after winning a couple of times.
Yeah, he was fired up. Yeah, that trip was a blast, man. I mean, it's amazing how much we still like talk about that and laugh about that, because it was just such a ridiculous time. But yeah, it was as good of a bonding trip as you could ever ask for a bunch of college basketball kids that are, you know, trying to go win games. And it's different now because the rules have changed. So these teams can all kind of practice and stuff in the summer now and work out more formally. But back when you and I played, all you could do in the summer was lift weights and play pickup. You couldn't do anything else. Yeah. You couldn't do workouts unless you were doing one of those summer trips, which you could do once every 4 summers. So those like 2 weeks or whatever we had prior to Bahamas, we actually got to get like structured workouts and practices in. And so I thought for us, those were huge. Those were extremely helpful, because then you were just ahead of the 8 ball come official practice time. So like I said, obviously it's different now. They can do all those things anymore in the summer. But for us back then, I thought that was huge.
Gonna put you on the spot a little bit. Favorite college player growing up?
Oh my God, bro.
I know.
That's a hard one, man.
Mine was Johnny Flynn until Steph Curry like really started knocking heads down. Like
Steph
for
is
real.
up there. I mean, Steph legitimately might be mine too, because I remember in high school, everyone's like, man, this like small skinny dude for Davidson is killing people. And yeah, Steph was definitely up there. I mean, when I was younger too, obviously Kirk Heinrich was one at KU. You know, I was probably 10, 11 years old. And, you know, I vividly remember like Saturday afternoon games, KU would be on ESPN or whatever. And you sit down, you watch Kirk Heinrich, Nick Collison, et cetera, et cetera. And Kirk was the man. So yeah, Kirk or Steph would probably be the two I would say.
Favorite road arena to play in the Valley?
Oh, Wichita. Yeah, it's not even.
Yeah,
it's not
even close. Coach Max said the same thing. So
the rest of the ones are terrible. Well, Northern Iowa wasn't bad. Northern Iowa beat us at the buzzer senior year at Northern Iowa, and it was buzzing pretty good for that. But gosh, the other ones, man, I don't know if you. Yeah, I guess it probably would have been your freshman year. Remember Evansville switched arenas?
Oh, the old one,
yeah,
disgusting. Remember they had the monster truck the day before we played, so the floor was so slippery during warm-ups. Like, we're like, what? Did they drive the monster trucks on the hardwood? What's going on?
It was terrible. That was one of the worst arenas. Indiana State's arena was brutal, like straight out of 1977. I mean, it was.
But hey, that Larry Bird jersey hanging up made it all the worthwhile for that Indiana State arena, though. Because I remember when I first walked in there, I was like, "Oh, this is dope."
Yeah. I mean, we were one of the first. We were also. This isn't the Valley, but we were one of the first teams to play in Oregon's new arena. They had just gotten that new arena when we played them.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
they had only had like 4 or 5 games on it. I mean, obviously everybody knows this now, but they literally didn't even have the half court line painted.
Half court line, yeah.
I mean, think about that today. Think about that in today's games. Like, how absurd is that to not have the half court line painted, and then you're playing games, and then it ends up that they call
a backcourt violation is what ends the game. Yeah, unbelievable. Crazy. Favorite restaurant in Omaha? I'm really putting you on the spot now.
Well, I get a hard time for this, and everybody mostly knows this, but Big Fred's. I grew up on Big Fred's. I grew up on Big Fred's. It's just our spot. It's our family spot. My dad used to bartend there. it's just kind of I don't know, for whatever reason, it's just our family spot. I understand that there's places that have better food. Like, I get that. You know, like Grant Gibbs always like rides me about Big Fred's. I'm like, bro, I'm not saying it's a Michelin star restaurant. I've never once said that. It's just like nostalgic to me. That's why I like going there. So
I love it. I love it, bro. And I'm so happy right now because when people found out you were on the podcast, a couple of texts came through like he's gonna mention Big Fred's as his favorite. So I'm so happy that you stayed true to brand and you didn't go bougie or anything like that.
No. I will say the best pizza, sticking on the pizza train though, the best pizza in town is Noli's in Blackstone, which
absolutely
is about as good as it gets.
Yeah. And I guess I kind of asked you that, but favorite basketball college moment?
Favorite college moment?
Basketball related.
I've got a lot of like, not nights at
right.
or happening.
Yeah.
Basketball. I mean, I've got a lot of funny ones. I guess I'm trying to think of a favorite one. Favorite one, probably the tournament. That's what you grow up like wanting to do. I mean, that's what when you're a kid and hoops is your life, that's all you want to, that's all you think about as a kid is like playing an NCAA tournament. That's all you think about. So like finally I vividly remember, and this was never, ever the case. Every time I checked into a game, I never once thought about this, but I specifically remember checking in against Carolina and being like, whoa, man, this is like the real deal. I'm on CBS right now playing North Carolina in an NCAA tournament, like despite the fact that we're down 15 or 16, whatever it was, and it's kind of the end of the game. Like, this is a pretty surreal moment. So that's probably the one overarching moment that sticks out.
Ross, thank you so much, man, for stepping into the J with me one more time. We've done this in our history. It feels good to do it virtually, one time for the one time. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Philip 68 Media Network for content such as this. I'm your host, Jahan's Maniga. Ross, love you, bro. Can't wait to see you again this summer. We're gonna chop it up as always.
We'll chop it up. I'll touch base soon and keep killing it in Poland, brother.
Appreciate you, man. And as always, you guys out there who are listening, stay safe and go Jays.
Go Jays, man.